Yes, hello. Welcome to today's session on anti-Semitism on Twitter with Günther Jikeli, our today's speaker. The session itself is part of a larger webinar series called Anti-Semitism in Europe in the Context of Conspiracy Theories and Nationalism, and is part also of the Education Action Weeks Against Anti-Semitism in cooperation with the Amadeo Antonio Foundation. My name is Kim Robin-Stoller, and I'm the chair of the board of directors of the International Institute for Education Research on Anti-Semitism based in Berlin, and the abbreviation is IIBSA. And our guest today is also a long-standing colleague, Günther Jikeli. He is also the co-founder of our institute and is still the vice chair of the board of directors of IIBSA. But he has been working at the Indiana University's Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism for a while already, and he will talk about it a little bit at the beginning also, and about the program they are having there at Indiana University. He's there the Erna B. Rosenfeld professor and is associate professor in Germanic studies and Jewish studies there at the Indiana University. He will speak about 25 to 30 minutes and will present on the one hand the methodology and how they get some of their results, including what they used as a definition, the IRA definition, and how they implemented it in this research project. And on the other hand, of course, he will speak about the results on how people talk on Jews on Twitter. And I will directly turn the voice to Günther, and thank you to everybody that you're here, and especially to you, Günther, that you took the time and the energy to be with us and give this interesting talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Kim, for this nice introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining our conversation. It still sometimes feels a bit weird to do this online, but yeah. So my plan is to show you what we did over the past couple of years, actually, with a group of students here. Especially, I want to thank Denisan Pak and Wijong Jong and Parovi Wag for their great work in putting this infrastructure up, because a lot of this research on social media, and we have focused on Twitter, requires a lot of detailed preparation of the data. So they were involved in that. And then we had a team of annotators, Daniel Mieling and Jana Solomon, and now Sophie has just joined us. So we're a team of annotators, so it wouldn't be possible to do that on my own, what I'm gonna present here. And so I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation. I would go over it, and I hope that we can have then time for discussion. What really does that mean, all that? Because that's often something that I have experienced in looking at big data, that you can lose yourself in the data and then have some nice statistics, but it gets meaningless to some extent if you don't always challenge, okay, what does it tell us, this kind of data? All right, but now I want to share my my screen, the PowerPoint. Just give me a second, please. So, okay. Do you all see the first slide of the PowerPoint now? should say talk on Twitter about Jews. So this is what we spent a lot of time on in the last couple of years, really. So I want to present something of our results on the metadata analysis, and then some results of representative samples. And that is something that very few have even attempted to do, to get representative samples of what's going on Twitter. And it's in itself, it's a questionable even if we say these are representative samples of the number of tweets, then what does it really stand for? Because of course some tweets get more views than others. I will talk about definitions. This is crucial. So how do we define anti-Semitism? We use the IIRA definition, but even if you use the IIRA definition, it's not easy to apply that always consistently, but this is our aim, that we apply this IIRA definition consistently to the tweets, because we want to establish a gold standard. That means in IA speak, that you have a large enough annotated sample that you can run algorithms over it, so that the algorithms then can identify similar tweets, or our goal is then to find anti-Semitic tweets. Our goal, of course, is not to say what should be banned or not be banned. This is not in our scope. As you probably have been following it, there has been a huge debate now on all social media platforms, on them and about them, how so-called hate speech should be banned. So just yesterday, Facebook came out, they want to ban Holocaust denial. Holocaust denial is one of the challenges, by the way, that we have found. It's often not so easy what to consider as Holocaust denial if you apply the IIRA definition. So what is could be called a softcore Holocaust denial or not, but I come to that later on. And then as we have gone through representative samples, I can give you some numbers of the percentage of anti-Semitic tweets that we found in these samples. So we use data mostly from a huge project here at IU, Indiana University. They have a contract with Twitter. They get 10% of all tweets on an ongoing basis, and that are statistically relevant. So I say representative. So this is the main basis that we're using, 10% of all tweets worldwide. In addition to that, we scrape our own data with some different tools. But in this presentation, I'll focus on the data that we get from this awesome project here at IU. This means 10% of all tweets. So please keep that in mind if I talk about numbers. All right, so I will talk about two data sets. Well, you see three here, 2019, then the first 4 months of 2020, and then the second 4 months of 2020. So we ran statistical analysis on these three data sets. And for the first two, we have gone through representative samples that I can show you some results. So what can we learn from that? So it's kind of taken the results already, giving you the results. So what we see if we look at peaks, when we see peaks, so peaks means that on a given day there's many more tweets that we looked at tweets that have the word Jews in there. We have like a number of queries, but I focus then here now on all tweets that have the word Jews in there. That's of course only a fraction of, if we say, discussions about Jews on Twitter, but this is now the data set that I will present here. So if we talk about peaks of such tweets, we can see that this is often related, it's not surprising, to offline events or other news events. One peak on January 27th, of course, is the Holocaust Memorial Day. So then you have also a lot of tweets that contain the word Jews. What I want to emphasize is that we need more research on the influences. You will see in a minute why. And what we see, if we look at what can be some criteria of who can be considered an influencer, we can see that some individuals who are rather from the fringe groups, they can have a huge influence on Twitter, and therefore I think it's good to know that and to perhaps be able to focus on them if they are anti-Semites, for example. Right, then we see a lot of these conversations that I see, that we've seen in all these, from different indicators. If people talk about Jews, it's often talk about the Holocaust or anti-Semitism. There's also a lot of calling out anti-Semites, so that gets a lot of discussion and traction as well on Twitter. But the conversation is often around anti-Semitism or related to the Holocaust. And we've seen, even in our, when we look through the tweets, that since I would say May or June this year, Twitter is really taking down a lot of the anti-Semitic, but also in general, a lot of accounts and tweets, and also people are deleting themselves more and more tweets than previously. So going through some of these graphs, you can see, for example, here a graph. So we got in 2019, we got from this huge data set of 10% of all tweets, we got 1,200,000 tweets that have the word Jew in there, or Jews in there, right? And then you can look at the numbers per day, and we see here 3 big peaks. So the largest peak was about the controversial statement by Trump about the disloyalty of American Jews. And then you had 2 anti-Semitic attacks, violent attacks at the end of 2019 that also caused or were related to these peaks on Twitter. That itself, I think, is not super surprising. In the first part of 2020, you have, as I mentioned, the Holocaust Memorial Day had a huge peak, and then some of you might remember that in New York, the mayor of New York, de Blasio, he sent out a tweet that was discussed hugely on Twitter, and that was interpreted by many as anti-Semitic. He said, "My message to the Jewish community and all communities is this simple: the time for warnings has passed." And that was in relation to some funeral where people were apparently not social distancing, and where there was an Orthodox Jewish community, and de Blasio was targeting them with this tweet. So that got a lot of traction on Twitter, mostly condemnation of this tweet, by the way, but also endorsement and other things. So when we move on from May to September this year, we see 2 other large peaks. We see, again, this something in New York, and the related to Orthodox Jews in New York and COVID and social distancing, that there was a park in Brooklyn that was locked, and that was then a small Jewish community that was local there, or is local. They cut the lock, and that was filmed, and that got traction on Twitter, and there were debates around this. And then there was this anti-Semitic individual, Nick Cannon. He tweeted out, posted, and had it on his radio show, anti-Semitic things. So that also got a lot of traction on Twitter. So if we look at the influencers that have an impact on conversations of Jews, we could look at who have the most followers, or who has the most tweets, right? Who sends out the most tweets, or who is most often mentioned. And I think the latter is perhaps more telling. But if we look at who has the most followers, I mean, we see like the news outlets, they have millions of followers. CNN, only in our data set, right, has 50 million. Well, in general, CNN has almost 50 million followers. New York Times, 46 million. But they have, in our data set, not said much about Jews, right? So it's questionable if they are really so influential on conversations about Jews. But the numbers of followers, of course, if they tweet out something, all these followers get this tweet. And I highlighted here Sarah Silverman, who has more tweets, so 7 in this time period. And this is for the first part of 2020. So you could make the argument she is on this conversation about Jews as influential as CNN and the New York Times. Right, but so these are those with the top 10 users with most followers. And then you can also see who has the most tweets in our data set, right? In this 1.2 million tweets about Jews, who has the most tweets? And then you see, well, there's a bot who has, in our data set, 312 tweets. And this bot is just randomly taking Bible verses and putting them out. And often Jews are mentioned in these Bible verses, and has like 20,000 followers. And these are largely not anti-Semitic. But then you see, well, you see the biggest is also a news outlet, Haaretz, with almost 400,000 followers, also in the top 10 of in our data set about talking about Jews. And then you have what I highlighted in red, anti-Semitic users who have posted a lot, anti-Semitic tweets mostly. And so you can say, well, these are, they have some influence in these conversations. You can also look, and what I think is even more telling is to look at, okay, who is most often mentioned, right? And so number 1 in 2019 was Donald Trump in conversations about Jews, and often not anti-Semitic, sometimes related to anti-Semitism, sometimes this allegation that Jews would be disloyal, you can see that as anti-Semitic. So you have that. Then you have Ilan Omar. There was a lot of criticism, but also a lot of endorsement for her anti-Semitic tweets. And then you have what comes up a lot, the Auschwitz Museum, that usually tweets out every day. They tweet out often several tweets, something that happened on that day some 70 years ago or so, related to the Shoah. And you see also here in these most often mentioned individuals, you see some that are highlighted in red that that are often themselves say something anti-Semitic, or they are accused of saying something anti-Semitic, and then this gets mentioned. And the others in green, they often call out anti-Semites, or they advocate for better Muslim-Jewish relations. For example, Imam of Peace and SJ Peace, they do that a lot. In 2020, that changed a little bit, and I don't want to spend too much time with that, but so you see here the Auschwitz Museum is number one, and that makes sense because then it was, that is during the time when there was the Holocaust Memorial Day, so there were more tweets around the Holocaust then. But you see here, if you go down the list a little bit, you see on place 18 of the most influential users, because most often mentioned, if not now, they often post anti-Semitic things out there. And Sarah Wilkinson, she is very active on Twitter. She comes up much more in our queries related to Israel. So she's a fierce anti-Zionist and often bordering into anti-Semitism. And so they also have an influence here. So it makes sense also to go a little bit further down the list to see who are influencers there. Right, and this is just the latest part. You see the New York mayor there again. And here again, if you go down there, also in the period between May and September, you see, if not now.org, they are among the top 30 influencers. Nick Cannon, that got a lot of traction on Twitter with this podcast, where he decried the Rothschild centralized banking, 13 families to bloodlines that control everything, even outside of America. That was a quote. So you see some prominent anti-Semites, or those who are known for sending out anti-Semitic things, on the top 30 list of influencers. Mehdi Hassan, he is it's more anti-Zionist than blatantly anti-Semitic, but bordering sometimes into anti-Semitism. An Al Jazeera journalist, he has been accused of being close to the Muslim Brotherhood. Right, and Ice Cube, you probably all have heard about him. All right, so what is a prominent content? So what top retweets? That I think is also an interesting thing, but I think I have to skip this, and we can come back to that in the discussion, because I also want to show you some of the statistics that we got from going over the samples. So we rush over that, but just to summarize, maybe a lot of these retweets that get a lot of retweets, they are about the Holocaust. Of course, that makes sense in this period particularly, and it's a bit less in other periods where there's not the Holocaust Memorial Day. But yeah, so, but you also get, so that, for example, was the #1 retweet in this period between May to September this year, that Secretary Pompeo, he reacted to a tweet by this Iranian, Shahbaz Zarif, calling out the violence against homosexuals and women and Jews. So you have these kind of things also that are calling out anti-Semites that get a lot of retweets. This is, I mentioned that briefly. Then if you go a little bit down further up the list, you get also a lot of retweets that can be seen as anti-Semitic or anti-Semitic. Mehdi Hassan is here on number 14, trying to compare Muslims to Jews. And then on number 34, most often retweeted, was a tweet that accused Israel of sterilizing Black Ethiopian Jews, what I would consider and be considered in our definition as anti-Semitic. So again, this is what you can learn a lot already with these metadata analysis and looking at popular retweets. But I think it makes a lot of sense to look more into the influential users. And as I said, I also want to show you something about our samples. So we from this and other query samples. So for all the tweets that we got from Awesome that are in itself statistically relevant or representative, we then randomized another subsample that we can go over it manually. So we wanted to have samples of 500 tweets so that we can look at them and look at them through, we built to be able to look at them in a meaningful way and to annotate them. We built a portal for that so that we can go over it. And so we had a number of samples of 500 tweets each, and we used the IRA definition to go over them. We just went over the tweets that were not deleted because we wanted to see what is the context of it, what comes before it, looks through the history of the users and so on, or what were comments on these tweets. So when we looked through, present you 4 samples here that were then cross-checked. So 2 annotators went through all these 500 tweets, and then disagreement was then discussed. And so I share here now some of the results then that we got from going over that. So these were the 500 samples. We ran a script before we went over it to delete already the samples, so the tweets that were not live anymore on Twitter. But then from the time, so that was in May, when we ran the script, and then we annotated them, there was still a lot of tweets were deleted. So you see more than 10%. So in the first sample set, 64 were deleted then during that time when we could not annotate this. So this is also important to know because many of these deleted tweets are, of course, also anti-Semitic tweets. These tweets were all in English. We can see that some of them had some sarcasm in it that makes it a bit more difficult to annotate, but there were not too many. Then we had a lot of tweets that were in fact calling out anti-Semites. So this is a huge percentage. We still have to look closer why there are not so many in the 2019 second sample, Rep2, because all the others, they have over 150 tweets that call out anti-Semites. Yeah, for example, criticize what Ilan Omar said. And a lot of tweets are related to the Holocaust also. So when we look at anti-Semitic tweets, we can see that at least when we went through these sample sets, that and we claim that this is representative. In the one sample set that we had for 2019, we had we classified 17 as we said this. We are confident this is anti-Semitic, and the percentage you see here is based on the 500 sample, so it includes the deleted tweets, which can be argued that we should not include the deleted tweets, and then the percentage is higher. Because as you've seen here, in this first sample, for example, 64 tweets were deleted. So the percentage is then higher if you don't count them in. But still, if you look at these numbers, the percentage itself is not super huge for anti-Semitic tweets. So confident or probably anti-Semitic is in the first sample set between 5 and 6%, and in the 2019 years, and the beginning of 2020 between 10 and 11%. And as I said, the percentage is higher if you don't count in the deleted tweets. But if you multiply this, so we had in the year 2019 in our data set 1.2 million tweets, and these are 10% roughly of all tweets. So you can roughly say there were 12 million tweets that had the word Jew in them. So if 10% of these tweets are anti-Semitic, or probably anti-Semitic, that's a huge number. Okay, so what do we make of that? Yeah, I don't know, but maybe we should discuss it. So I've talked, I think, a little more than 25 minutes, and yeah, let's open the discussion, and maybe you want to hear more about our methods, how we try to apply the IRA definition. Maybe want to see the portal that we used, because we would like to invite more people to look at that and improve our methods, and maybe even the portal that we're using. Yeah, so I welcome any questions in any way, and please let me know if I should focus on something in more detail.
Okay, thank you very much, Günther, for this very interesting and telling presentation. I've seen there's also here attending another person who presented at our last session, Ildiko Barnar from Hungary. So I want to say hello to Ildiko Barnar as well, and maybe we can have
hi to all.
Maybe
thank you very much.
Conversation about the methodologies on analyzing anti-Semitic content at some point. But before opening the floor to the other participants, I want to ask Günther, what was the most challenging from your perspective at the whole research project so far?
Yeah, to get the infrastructure up, you have to first you have to understand how all these social media platforms work. So Twitter works very differently from, let's say, Telegram or Gap or 4chan. So you have to understand how they work to be able to get the data and to make some sense of the data. And then you have to prepare the data in a way that you can look at it. So it took us more than a year just to put up the portal that we can look at the tweets in a meaningful way, and then to have like a annotation masks that of form that we can use and then annotate it. And we try to do it in a way that for example, one of the major challenges is, what do you define as anti-Semitic or not? And we want to have a definition that is a standard definition that we can apply and that can be applied even if we don't agree with certain aspects of it. So we gave the annotators the option saying, if this is according to the IRA definition, not anti-Semitic, but I think it's anti-Semitic, or the other way around. So all these things that needs to be thought through. How do you deal with the data, and going beyond just like picking the worst cases and then showing how vile anti-Semitism is on the internet. We know that now. We know that. I mean, there are. I mean, it's hard to get more violent and more like extreme in anti-Semitism as what we've seen, for example, with Baliat, the terrorist from Halle, right? So what posting vile anti-Semitic posts and killings on streaming this. I mean, how can you get? So we know that. So going beyond that and saying, okay, what does it make really sense? So that's not easy, and it takes a lot of time to understand first where the data is coming from and what's happening.
Okay, thank you. So I would open to the other participants if there are any questions or comments so far. Then please raise the hand like this, or use the online version. As you can maybe see, Ildiko Barner raised the hand. So Ildiko, please go ahead.
Hi all, thank you very much. Günther, thank you very much for this very interesting talk. And as you may guess, it was very timely for us as well, because we are just before this phase of our own research. So I would be very interested if you could talk a little bit more about the annotation process. I really like your approach that you are using the IRA definition, because I think it's really very important to have a solid basis of what we mean by anti-Semitism. And it's also a very good idea to let the annotators say if they don't agree with the definition, or if they see something anti-Semitic which is not falling under the definition of IRA. But I would be very interested in the way how the annotation was going.
Yeah, I see here now two people who helped us. So I see, are they still there? Let me see. Yes, Günther Jikeli and Sophie von Marisi, sorry for the mispronunciation, who were in the data summit that we organized in, was it May? And Sophie is now also helping us with annotating more tweets, as I mentioned in the beginning. So maybe you can also add something to it. So about this process, how you went about it, if you want. I can also share the annotation portal that you can see it, what we use. So maybe I do this first. So we use this portal. We pick, let's say, this sample. So we made this this portal so that you can see the tweets. You can, if you click on the tweet, it opens up another tab and shows it to you on Twitter. And then we have this is our form, if you want. So we first check if the tweet still exists, then if it's still in English, and then we have the rating, anti-Semitic or not. And then we have the annotators say, if they say it's anti-Semitic or probably anti-Semitic, they should select what paragraph it applies to. And we put the IRA definition in here so that the annotators can look it up. And we made the paragraphs here that you can see. That's something, statistics that I'm in the process of preparing of which paragraph really is more often applied, and so we can see what kind of anti-Semitism we see more often on Twitter. So this is the one-page document that probably all of you know of the IRA definition, but we also made some what we call inferences of the IRA definition. And this is important because in some places it's like, for example, if you say, well, this is often applied, making mendacious, demonizing or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as a collective. So what are stereotypical allegations, right? And we said, well, we want to define what we mean by that. So we made it, we listed, so we went through academic works of what is seen as stereotypical accusations. So we found a lot of things about the Jewish character, these kind of accusations, then physical features, and supposed Jewish crimes, right? And so we listed these things. So another thing that comes up often is, what is this one? In the, what we have here as denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. So we said, we took like a almost legal approach here, if you want. Can this be, if there's an accusation that says, well, Israel has a racist policy. So we would say, well, this doesn't fall exactly under that. But if it's the state of Israel in itself is racist, or is, and we spell that out somewhere here, is an apartheid state in general. So that would then fall under this definition. So we go over that, and then we have, as I said here, the disagreement button. Then we also wanted to see what kind of sentiment rating there is. We want to see how this is calling out, and often it's in general terms calling out, but sometimes in very specific terms related to the Holocaust, and then you have the possibility to give comments. Sophie, do you want to add something to that, or Victor? No? Okay.
Ildiko, you want to go again?
Just a short follow-up question. I really like your approach. It's really fantastic. And I'm sorry to ask you like here about it, but would it be possible to use it as a know-how for our own research for Hungarian?
Sure.
Okay, then I will write you an email, and then we can talk about it, because it would be very good to, of course, giving you the credit, of course, but it would be, I think it's very valuable, and it would be very good to have some kind of standardized way to look at it.
We are more than happy if other people like use our work.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there other questions at this point?
I see one in the chat.
Okay. You want to read it and also answer?
Yeah. Well, the leading to acts of terror.
I think because the others were not able to, I just read them that because the others won't be able to see it. So one question is, any links between events such as the killing of Qasem Soleimani and anti-Semitic tweets? This is the first question. Second question, any relation to tweets actively leading to acts of terror or anti-Semitic violence? And the third one, is there analysis done on what percentage comes from right-wing, left-wing, and Islamist extremists?
So we haven't looked into the Soleimani thing. It didn't come up in our timeline as a big peak, but with our we could easily like put this in as an additional keyword and then look at that, how that comes up, how's that discussed. But it didn't come up like as a huge event in our data set. The relation between offline anti-Semitism and even extreme anti-Semitism, terror attacks, and online anti-Semitism, there is a clear relation, of course, but this is not so much on Twitter. And we see more and more of the extremist groups, they migrate to other platforms, such as Telegram. I think Telegram is even, they are advertising that they're welcoming QAnon users to come to their platform. And so, or you have Gap, where the terrorist of the murder in Pittsburgh was on, and these kind of platforms, they have a more open, I would say, well, from the users, they are more extreme, and they also, the platforms don't crack down on these users. So just after the murder in Pittsburgh, I went to the Gap a platform, and the discussion there on Gap was, some were condemning the murder of 11 praying Jews in the synagogue for saying these were only elderly Jews and it was ineffective, and others were praising it, praising the terrorist as a hero. So this kind of discussion you don't have so much on Twitter. Good enough, and Twitter is making this, and also Facebook, more and more difficult for users like this to have an audience. We have sometimes these kind of, we see sometimes this kind of very vile tweets also on Twitter, but this is rather, this is, I think, I mean, clearly not as much as on other platforms. And then the last one with the right, left, and Islamist extremists, we haven't done a systematic analysis of that so far. But that depends also on the on what you look at. So often it depends on, first of all, of course, what kind of tweets you look at, what kind of queries you look at. What we want to do is to be able to not only look at these samples that we generate with keywords, but we, as I said, we want to build a good enough gold standard. And Victor is here, he wrote a great program to look at a larger number of tweets to be able to identify that with algorithms. But we just need a better data set so that we can look at sample sets that are not only with keywords, so that we find what we're looking for. So yes, that is I think work that we want to do in the next years. We don't have the capacity so far to really look into these details. We could then see in our sample sets on conversations about Jews, we could make an estimation then how many people are then from the right, from the left, and from Islamist extremists. In our data set, as we look at tweets in English, there are not so many Islamist extremists. There are many from the left, but also many from the right. But often the language is also different. I mean, the English or another language, but also what kind of words they use is different from the right and from the left when they express anti-Semitism. So this is not so easy to get a good estimate if the anti-Semitism on Twitter is rather coming from the left or from the right or from Islamists. This is not so easy as a question, I think.
Okay, thank you. Is there a question? I see Stephen Pogani raise the hand.
Hello. Hi. Very interesting talk. But I have a query about the definition of anti-Semitism, because if I understood you correctly, Günther, you say that you were applying the ERA or IRA definition in examining posts on Twitter. But do you think, or would you agree that there is a danger in applying a broad definition of anti-Semitism? Indeed, a somewhat contested and controversial definition of anti-Semitism as a means of gauging the degree, the depth, the severity, and the extent of anti-Semitism. So while on the one hand, I acknowledge that the ERA definition is attracting increasing acceptance by governmental authorities, many Jewish lawyers, Jewish intellectuals, whom I would particularly admire, I would include here a former judge of the British Court of Appeal, Sir Stephen Sedley. He wrote a withering critique of the ERA definition of anti-Semitism in the London Review of Books in, I think, May 2017. So, in other words, I suppose essentially my question is the definition a useful tool for understanding the limits and extent of anti-Semitism? So Stephen Sedley would say not. I would tend to agree with him.
Well, you have to look at the details, you know. So what we do, as you've seen when we annotate them, we go into every paragraph, and then if you look into the paragraph, so it makes it more transparent. This is the most transparent definition that I know of. So if you know a better one, send it over. So you need a standard definition. That's my argument. You need one standard definition. I mean, at least that we apply consistently. If in another research project you want to have another definition, go for another definition if you want. But we think there's some benefit in using this because it's a very detailed definition. A lot of people agree on this definition, and we can bring it down to different paragraphs. That if you, for example, if you have some people have, those who criticize this our definition, usually they have some issues with which one is that usually? It's some of these Israeli
double standard, I think.
Sorry?
The double standard.
Where is it in there? I don't see double standard. Where is it?
It's section, I think, 8. The 8th.
So if you look, yes, that's right. Applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nations. So this, I just looked into what was applied. So that was in our data sets, and now by Erna annotators, maybe once or twice, but hardly ever applied as a criteria to say this is anti-Semitic. So we could even, I mean, we don't want to leave this out because we say that we use this definition, and but if you wanted, you can leave that out and it wouldn't change much in our annotation. Right? But the advantage is that you can bring it down paragraph by paragraph. You can say, okay, this is why I apply the IRA definition, or this definition, why this tweet is anti-Semitic or not anti-Semitic. Just need one definition that, at least for one project, you're consistent and saying, well, I apply this. So the double standard thing is, in fact, in practical terms, not necessary. We didn't use that almost ever. What we used more were these claims of racist endeavor, 3.1.7, denying the Jewish people their right of self-determination. So that, but most often used, in fact, was the making malicious, demonizing stereotypical allegations about Jews directly. I mean, makes sense in a data set about Jews, where the word Jew is in there. But that was used more often than the others. Where we had difficulties rather was the Holocaust denial part. So that was more challenging for us to see when is it Holocaust denial, diminishing. So when you see here, that's in the IRA definition saying denying the fact, scope, mechanisms, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II. So denying the scope, that is something that is difficult to, in some cases, with these comparisons that we often see. You know, we live in an area where everyone is Hitler, Trump is Hitler, and the detention centers on the Mexican border are concentration camps. So is that if you say, well, this is there are concentration camps on the Mexican border and the immigrants are treated like the Jews, is that diminishing of the Holocaust? Maybe. So this is rather difficult. What often people in theory have an issue with, this double standard thing, in practice, it's not really an issue. But yeah, Stephen, what kind of definition do you propose?
Well, Stephen Tedley has a very simple one. Let me just try and find it. He says, shorn of philosophical and political refinements, anti-Semitism is hostility towards Jews as Jews. And his critique, I'll send you, I'm sure you know his article in the London Review of Books, but he argues that there are a number of difficulties with the IRA definition. I'm a lawyer by training, I completely concur. And so, for instance, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, applying double standards by requiring the State of Israel behavior not expected or demanded of other democratic nations, and then firstly, manifestations targeting the State of Israel, etc. I don't want to take up too much time, but he goes on and says this. He says, two of these examples assume that Israel, apart from being a Jewish state, is a country like any other, and so open only to criticism resembling such criticism as can be made of other states, placing the historical, political, military, and humanitarian uniqueness of Israel's occupation and colonization of Palestine beyond permissible criticism. I think where he uses the word uniqueness, he goes too far. Otherwise, he has to be right. Israel is not Denmark, at least not 21st century Denmark. Circumstances, as anyone who visits the West Bank or knows anything about Gaza will know, circumstances are very, very different. So Sedley's point would be that perhaps more radical, severe, stringent criticisms are warranted of a state of military occupation, which, and it is that as a matter of international humanitarian law, which cannot be equated with standards of democracy applicable within states and applicable to a fair degree within Israel, although, as I'm sure you'd agree, complete equality between Arab and Jewish citizens of Israel remains a somewhat distant prospect. So I'll send you a link to his article, and he is a highly distinguished retired Jewish former judge of the British Court of Appeal, not a radical Marxist, revolutionary, post-colonial theorist.
Thank you, Stephen. But I mean, what I heard is not convincing to me. I rather hear that it's a theoretical discussion where people they want to save their anti-Zionism, and therefore they look for excuses to attack a definition where they might also be called out on. So, as I said, I mean, in practice, this is not, this double standard thing hasn't even come up. The racist thing has come up, but it's in a racist in a way. I often use that if you want to speak, you know, not like on this text of the IIBSA definition, but if you make the distinction between criticizing somebody or insulting somebody, right? Or I mean, this is, you go to the in this this kind of saying Israel in itself, whatever Israel does, is a racist country. It's like shouldn't exist. I mean, this goes to the essence, and then we can. And here I disagree with the IIBSA definition in many ways. So often when I went through that, I take, according to the IIBSA definition, this is not, often this is not anti-Semitic, but I think this is a clear indication of some anti-Semitic resentment, but it's not strong enough for the IIBSA definition. When you see that people focus so much on Israel and want to find something and only find something negative, and often it's in the emotion that we've seen very often that you can say, well, this is an indication. And then often if I see the tweet, that is, according to the IIBSA definition, it's not anti-Semitic. If I click on the user and look at other posts, I see that these kind of sentiments, they come out in other ways as well. So that's for me then a confirmation that I was right, that I see, okay, there's an indication. So again, going back here, I think the IIBSA definition is good enough to say, well, it gives us a clear distinction, and good enough sense what is then, what can be seen as anti-Semitic or not. We can never look into people's heads. We never know. And especially on Twitter and on other social media, we don't even know if there's a human behind that or a machine. So often you have bots sending out randomly stuff, and sometimes not. There's something you can, depending on how you do the bot, there is some intention behind it, but sometimes it's absolutely randomly things put out there. For example, just taking quotes from Shakespeare. We had a bot like this, saying, like, taking a sentence from Shakespeare here and there, just randomly, and sending this out. So some of that is anti-Semitic or has some anti-Semitic stereotypes. So that is an anti-Semitic, but the intention, probably not. There is no intent behind. But you can see that. So it's hard to use a good definition, but it's, for us, it's good enough to say this, we can consider this as very likely to be anti-Semitic. You can never be 100% sure, right? I don't know any definition that you can 100% be sure. So this is a good enough definition that we can work with. It's a working definition. It's not in a sense, a legal definition that this is then used to ban things. And many of these anti-Semitic tweets that we find that have anti-Semitic stereotypes, where we say this is confident anti-Semitic because people say the Jews are all rich. Well, I don't think it would be the right way to ban these kind of things, right? It's better to have a conversation about it. But that's a different story. We now are focused on not what is the worst thing that should then be taken off from Twitter, but what can we consider as anti-Semitic, and then work with that, and then see, okay, what are networks, what are influences, and so on. So it's not like, and many of these, what you mentioned, this criticism of Israel, that of course, I mean, criticism is different than defaming, right? Defamation and criticism is a very different thing.
Okay, thanks, Günther. I think one interesting aspect would also be if you would do the same project and instead looking for tweets containing the term Jew or Jews, like put there Israel, and to see what the conversation about Israel, to which extent it's anti-Semitic. Do you have something in mind to go into this direction as well? Yeah, and then the issue, of course, is with the double standard thing, where I think like to operationalize it, it might be difficult to a certain extent. But I think it's easier if you look for the term Jews instead, and you don't contain the term Israel. It's easier, like where the connection, if a tweet contains Jew and Israel, it could more often be an overgeneralization of Jews and to refer to Israel in this context or whatever. But the other way around might contain different challenges. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, we are working on it. We have done, you might have seen it even when I pulled up the annotation portal. We have other samples that have the keyword Israel. We have also other samples with the keyword COVID and Holocaust, and so I think that is we want just to have more samples with a number of different keywords. And Israel, of course, we expect, and we've seen already, a lot more of anti-Zionist forms of anti-Semitism. And then a comparison would be interesting. So yeah, we do as much as possible with these keywords, but yeah, going through all these tweets that you have to go through manually then, as we saw in the last presentation with Ildiko, is just a lot of work. And so it will take us some time before we get some comparison. That would be also interesting to see, okay, what's a comparison in the forms of anti-Semitism that we see in the data set of Jews, keyword Jews, and Israel, and is there maybe more or less, or where's that going? And then I can try to maybe make a special graph for Stephen to see how many of these tweets were applying these double standards thing. Is that where we categorize that or not? So my suspicion is that this double standard thing, in practice, this is not really coming up. I agree, this is difficult to annotate even, double standard, but there are a lot of other categories, if you want, that cover enough that you don't even need this double standard thing. It's a challenging thing, this double standard. I get your point, Stephen, that every country is different. So yeah, when it is a double standard, or when it is like just talking specifically to a certain case, that is then Israel, that is a challenge and that probably needs more thought to make it clear where the distinction then is.
Okay, like we said, we would have about 1 hour, a little bit more for this session. So we reached already the time. Günther, I want to thank you a lot for the presentation and all the work you're doing there, and interesting preliminary results you were able to share. Thank you very much for this, and I hope that we can have a second talk on the subject in a couple of months to see where we get then. And I also want to thank all the participants who joined us, and I hope to see you soon at one of our other events. And thank you very much, and have a great day and a great evening for those attending from Europe. Okay, all the best to you. Bye-bye.